you would help that service, Lord, at the food bank, Lord, to be about more than food. Pray, Lord, you create, Lord, help us to recognize pockets of opportunity to talk with people, Lord. It's kind of fast moving and stuff over there, Lord, but it's kind of the deal in life. Stuff is fast when we choose to settle down and just kind of take our time when we tend to notice your voice. And so I pray, Lord, that we get opportunities to pray, just talk with people, Lord, pray for people. May you give us words of knowledge, words of wisdom while we're there, Lord, helping and serving. And Father, we just put that opportunity in your hands. We ask you to bless it, Lord. And Lord God, we just pray, Lord, as we study your word, may you speak to our hearts. Open it up for us, Lord God, in a way that only you can do, Lord. We're asking you, Holy Spirit, to teach us, not so that we get smarter, but so that we can embrace the transformational work you're doing in our life. We want transformation. We want to look more like Jesus. And we know faith comes from hearing your word, Lord. And we ask you, Lord God, to just bless this short time we have. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So we're studying through this book, Romans, which for some people, they would say Romans is, I think I quoted somewhere, they said that Galatians is like the Magna Carta of the New Testament, and Romans is like the Constitution. It is like the full body, the details. For a lot of people, they say it's the most important book in the New Testament. And we shared last time about how many people throughout the Christian faith, pillars of the Christian faith, men and women, when they actually came in contact with the book of Romans, they thought the Christian life was some other way, or they didn't even know about the Christian life. But when they came in contact with certain passages from Romans, their lives got totally turned upside down. Just totally transformed. God did a significant work inside of them, and it was amazing. And one of those individuals came from a home of 19 kids. Mom was, talk about a busy mom. In every sense of the word. I mean, crazy. 19 kids in that home. Two of those boys became leaders in one of the greatest awakenings we've ever had here in America. And for one of them, it was because he went to a Bible study that somebody was having in Romans. He thought he knew what God was like. He thought he understood righteousness and grace and all this stuff. But then he went to this little, Bible study wherever it was over in England, and he was just totally rocked. And he said he felt this burning inside, his heart, as they studied it together. And then literally just took over the globe with the message of Jesus. Pretty awesome stuff. So I'm praying for, and I am asking God to do a radical work, I hope, in your heart and my heart. Then collectively that makes us the church as we study through the book of Romans. I'm praying and expecting for that to happen. We've actually never studied through this book together. This is one of the ones we haven't done. We've done a lot. I think since we've been in the church, I want to say we've done over 13 books of the Bible. And that doesn't really fit in really well with a lot of church planting books, programs, and ideas. They won't tell you really to do that. But listen, you got to do what the Spirit leads you to do. Amen? Amen. That's what you got to do. So, and it's been rich. It's been rich. There's been a lot of good things that have happened because of that. And so I'm praying and hoping. And I hope you're coming with the expectation, hey, listen, as we unpack the book of Romans together, the Lord is going to do a significant work in your heart and in your mind. Just come with that expectation. It's not just we're just studying the book. It's the Spirit of God is going to speak very specific things about God's heart and about His plan of salvation, about the gospel, about righteousness. He's going to clear some stuff up for you. He's going to set you free in particular areas. If you choose to actually engage and settle yourself before the Lord and do this together. I will also say this, don't count on me to give you all that good stuff, because I am not. I will give you the best that I can, but the best stuff that's going to happen is going to be between you and the Lord as you just interact with it and just spend time with it. This is just secondary information. Any pastor, anybody giving information from the Word, it's always secondary. It's not first-hand. It's not you and the Lord like that. So, I'm looking forward to it. Here's what we did last time, okay? Just to bring you up to speed in case you missed some of it. Last time we only covered the first 6 verses. That was it. We're not going to get much further today. And the reason why we only did 6 verses was because The Paul and only Paul fashion, he packed so much like theological jargon and terminology in those 6 verses. It'd be a mistake to just be like, oh, everybody knows like what that means. That'd be a huge mistake. So we had to just unpack some of that. So here's the way that we did it. Again, very quickly, if you want to listen more in detail, feel free to check it out online. But what we did was this. We talked about 5 critical components of what we call the gospel. 5 critical components of the gospel. When you think about the gospel, I'm hoping some things come to mind, and it's not just an empty slate. I'm hoping some stuff comes to your mind, and if you had to say, hey, here's the most important part or parts of the gospel, I'm hoping God is doing in your work where He can identify some things. And I'm also hoping that if you name those things, you could also maybe put some scripture reference to it as well. And say, you know what? I believe this is the core part of the gospel, and I believe it because it says this here. Oh, I believe this also is a core part because it says this here. So in the first 6 verses, here's what we came up with last time. Number 1, one core component is servanthood. You can't even talk about the gospel. You never even really understand the gospel. You could understand about God, about Jesus coming and dying. That's great. But that's a whole other thing to just know about that and actually know Him who did it. And actually live life that way. And one of the ways that we know that we are actually doing that is if we live as a servant. Sure, we're a son, we're a daughter as well. But it's also very unique in that He's our Lord and we're the servants. We don't lose in that deal, by the way. We totally make out. But it's not until we actually say, like Jesus said, He's like, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say? I don't understand that. And we've made a way for that, by the way, in like 2020, and like the weird, like just Christian thing that we're in. Like, we just made room for people like, oh, Lord, Lord, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, but I don't like with everything Jesus said. It's the same problem back then, we got the same problem now. But servanthood, that's a critical component of the gospel. The next critical component, bless you, was being separated. Like, you cannot follow the Lord and like live the gospel life unless you're separated. You've chosen to separate yourself from certain things, even possibly from certain people. Even though that sounds really unloving, that actually sometimes comes with it. Sometimes comes with it. Third thing we talked about is that the gospel, the source of it. So 3 S's so far, right? Servant, set apart, source, meaning this is God's gospel. This was not invented by man. This wasn't some like amazing idea that just a group of people in a room just got together. They said, hey, let's make some really good news for everybody to celebrate. It didn't go down like that. It was God saying, hey, listen, this people, my creation is lost. Sin has just wreaked havoc, and it's stolen their lives and their identity and everything that was supposed to be good. And you know what? It's not about them finding me. I'm going to them. It's God's gospel. That's the source of it. God coming to us, not us going to Him. So when they give their testimonies, right? It's awesome that they found the Lord and He's spoken to their hearts and He's done a thing, just like in your life. But the reality is He initiated that process and He made it possible. He came down to us. It's the only, we'll call it religion, only religion in the world that involves God coming to His people and making a way for them to get to Him. Now we endlessly just work crazy hard and hopefully they make it there. Number 4, the fourth one was structure. If you can understand the gospel, you got to know the structure of the gospel. It's all about Jesus. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, it's one unified story that points towards Jesus Christ and is fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Last one that we talked about, the 5th one, was singular. The gospel is incredibly singular, and that's where the rub is for a lot of people. But Jesus says things like, I am the way, the truth, and the life, but nobody comes to the Father but through me. And then in Acts it says there's no other name under heaven by which man must be saved. So we did those 5 components last time. We talked about that. Now we're going to unpack some other stuff this morning. I want to show you some pretty neat stuff here, okay? So verse 8, here he goes. Verse 8, Paul is writing to Romans. And he said, first, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. You know, as I was reading that this week, I felt like there was like an immediate check in my spirit as I was reading that. The part where it says, your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. I just started thinking about that. And, you know, here's what's really interesting. There's a few different things. One is, like, who are these Romans? Number one. Like, who are these people? Currently, Paul, who's writing this, he's in a whole other place right now. He's in a place called Corinth. So you read the book of Corinthians, right? When we visit them, we planted some churches there. He was there for in this particular area of Greece for 3 months, and it's 600 miles away from Rome. And that's when he's writing this. And so there's this church 600 miles away. No apostle had ever gone over there. None of the 12. There was no huge named disciples that went there. They never experienced or saw any miracles or supernatural signs and wonders. How did they get over there? What are they doing? And who are these people? And Paul says, hey, listen, your faith, it's being heard everywhere, all around the world. And when he says all around the world, as far as Paul knows, all he knows is Rome. And Rome was massive, by the way, if you don't know that in history. This was around 60 AD. They literally owned everything and everywhere. And like I said, all roads lead to Rome. Legit, all roads. From Africa, from Egypt, from everywhere. From Germany, from everywhere. All going there. And Paul's saying, man, everyone has heard about the faith of these guys. So here's what Paul's doing. He's saying, well, I'm hearing about these Romans. There's this church in Rome. I don't know where these people are coming from. Who are these believers? It's made up of Jews and Gentiles. And somehow they're figuring that out. They're not discriminating against each other and fighting and having problems. He said, somehow God is blessing it. It's I got to write to them. I got to let them know who God is, what Jesus is like, what he's done, what righteousness means, what grace. He's I got to give them the deal. I got to give them the deal of what this means. I started thinking about that more, and I'm man, that's crazy. What do you mean? They didn't have a pastor? They didn't have some elders? They didn't have some cool church system in place? They didn't do a fun worship event? They didn't have food trucks? Are we saying that there's a group of people that listen, they were broke and they had nothing and they just loved the Lord? And they got together, and somehow their faith became famous? That is legit. Because I start to think about church, I think about Christianity now, 2020, and I'm the fact that he put that word in there, he said, your faith is spoken of throughout the world. The Greek word there is pistis. That sounds bad, but it's not. Pistis. P-I-S-T-I-S. Pistis. You cannot find that. But I think about it your pistis is heard everywhere. Your faith is you can't handle it. You can't handle it. But it's I think about it, some churches now, it's oh, their music, oh my gosh, their music is, they're known for their music. Or their children's program, oh, that's what they're known for, that's their thing. Or they're preaching, oh my gosh, that's just their, and it's just you have all these things, and I'm not against excellence, by the way. Please hear that. I'm not that's a bad thing. Excellence is not a bad thing. But I feel it's kind of rare to hear about certain communities of faith and churches where it's you know what? Whatever's going on there, the faith in that place with those people is I haven't been around that. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how those people simply just trust in the Lord. And so the argument could be made, well, they're making all that great music and having those amazing kids programs and doing all this stuff because their faith is so amazing. I kind of buy into that a little bit, but not a whole lot. You can make up some really good stuff and have your faith not be amazing. You get enough people with the right kind of gifting, the right amount of training, and toss in some cash. Listen, you can do it. It's been shown time and time again. But I'm after this issue of faith. is that? How is that their faith is being heard all throughout Rome? Catches Paul by surprise. He's got like this 3-month window. He was actually just chased out of town. They're trying to stone him. He's like basically hiding out for like 3 months in Greece, right near Corinth. And he's like, man, I got to write to them. How are people hearing about something that has like no structure? There's nothing amazing about it. I want to suggest just 2 things to you real quick, and then I promise we'll move on from the verse. Just 2 things. One thing is this. I feel like there's nothing like a faith that is as obedient as it possibly can be with what it knows. There's nothing like a simple faith. Because sometimes we think, well, I got to know this, and I got to learn that, and I got to hear on this people, and I need to be trained, That's like the word in the church now. Get trained, get trained, get trained, get trained. Like, you know what? Maybe it's possible that some of the training, some of the education has somehow replaced some of the desperate dependency upon the Lord. Maybe it's creeped into the church a little bit that, hey, listen, as long as I get this training done, and I get around this class, and I do these things, then I'll be ready to do this, and serve, and represent the Lord. Let's just suggest for a moment that if you are desperately dependent upon the Lord, and maybe you miss some of the training, but you spent some time in fasting, and on your face, and in worship, and maybe crying your way through it, something pure, something amazing, and some real levels of faith are going to come out of that. And maybe you're going to miss some of the training perks, but I'll tell you what, you're going to start to hold on to the core things that are really important. They didn't have. Who was going to Rome teaching them, expounding, just amazing wisdom about the Lord? The answer is nobody. They were together just trying to do the best that they could. Listen, all we really know, and they didn't even tell us what they really knew. We know about this Jewish guy, Jesus, and he came, he did these miracles, he died, he rose again. He says we should be generous, so we gotta try to be generous. And he says to forgive people, so we're gonna try to do that. And he says that bitterness is gonna eat us up, so we gotta stay away from that stuff. And he says we gotta think of others before ourselves. And he says that we shouldn't retaliate evil to evil. He says, love the ones that are unlovable. That sounds so much different than, hey, we got to put together the most amazing whatever at our church. I think sometimes it just gets sideways. I want to be a church family, and I hope it's deep within your heart. You want to be a part of a place where it's you know what? The faith in this place is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. As soon as somebody learns something about the Lord, the people in that place, wherever the place is, the people in that place, they're not into negotiating with God now. They're just wanting to be obedient as soon as they possibly can. So when they started to find out that certain things in their life needed to be adjusted and that God was speaking on that, they weren't trying to give permission to themselves to be disobedient. They're trying to find ways how to just fall in line. They're doing the simple things, the best that they can. And I'll tell you what, that's super powerful. So for so many of us, myself included, we don't need a lot more Bible information. There's a whole lot. For some stuff, we're going to need some Bible stuff because some doctrines are just kind of quirky and just out there and weird. But for a lot of obedience to really represent Christ well, it's about just being obedient with the simple things that we know. That's how your faith gets really famous. And let me also say this. There's all these quotes about Rome during this time that it was the filthiest, most sinful, just funky, nasty spot. And by the way, there isn't just one church in Rome at this time. There's a whole bunch of little churches all around, pockets. So they have no training, no professional people, no apostles, haven't seen any supernatural stuff. They're in the midst of a horrible church growth environment, and they're taking off and everybody's hearing about it. That just strikes me as a deep place, and I hope it does for you as well. Because it's not even just about churches, by the way. Churches are made up of people. So listen, you only know what you know about the Lord right now for today. So just be as faithful as you can with that. Got to figure out the rest of the stuff. And none of us really have ideal situations, and some really stink. And it's not about trying to figure out how stinky your situation is. It's trying to figure out how can I be faithful to just the little bit that I know right now with God. That stuff becomes faithful. Whether you tweet about it, or it's recognized on Facebook, or whether it gets likes, or you get YouTube views, it's really a non-issue. There's a famous faith, and it's rooted in some really desperate hearts that just cry out to the Lord and say, God, I don't know. But I know that I want you, and I know I want to follow you, and I'm quite sure how to do that. But hey, listen, if you put it in front of me, you want me to go teach our Sunday school class, Lord, I'll do it. Even though I can't stand it, but I'll go do it. Or Heavenly Father, you want me to go serve in that area, go do that thing? I don't even... Listen, it's great to be in a church environment where you get to do stuff that you love. The reality is, you don't get to do a lot of stuff that you love. And that's okay too. But it's just, are we willing? Are we able to? That speaks of people's faith. It speaks of people's faith. So it's a famous faith, and it doesn't need a whole heck of a lot. It really doesn't. So he says this stuff. He says, hey, listen, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son. We talked about the gospel last time. It's going to be a theme that's going to run all through when we're going to Romans. Look at this. That without ceasing, I make mention of you always in my prayers. Don't you want a shepherd like that? Don't you want a pastor and some leaders like that? Don't you want to be like a parent and lead your home like that? You know? That really speaks to a deep place. He says all the time, without ceasing, I make mention of you always in my prayers. You can tell a lot by the way that you feel about somebody else, and if you love them and care for them, especially those that are close for you. It's pretty proportional to the amount of time you spent in prayer for them. Not whether you think well of them or not, but you can tell you're really trying to champion their soul by the frequency and the opportunity you get to place them right before heaven and just intercede on their behalf. You can say, I love you all day long, and I think a lot about you, and you can do some nice stuff. But for the faith-filled person, you know that you're really loving from a pure place, from a right place. And you just know, man, I just got to put him before the throne. I want to see the Lord just come alive in life. I want them to just see things, and I just wanted to experience what he's like. That's the way we can love people really well. That's the way we're called to do it. And Paul's doing that the best that he can. He says, verse 10, he says, making request, if by some means, now at last I may find a way in the will of God to come to you. Verse 11, for I want to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift and collect an honorarium. For I want to see you that I may impart you some spiritual gifts and get a private jet. He's not saying any of that stuff. He's saying, listen, for I long to see you that I may impart you some spiritual gifts so that you may be established or made firm. That is, that I may be encouraged together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Man, I love what he's doing here, by the way. The way Paul's unpacking this stuff, this is ridiculous, okay? His heart is so pure, he wants to do it for such the right reasons. He's not hey, listen. The Apostle Paul, you probably heard about me, I will be coming around soon. Make sure that this camel picks me up. Make sure it's 72 degrees in that camel. I want to make sure there's a lemonade, not too cold. And he kind of could do that in a sense. He could pull a power card if he wanted to. Here's his deal. He's like, man, listen, I'm not in this for the money. I'm not in this for whatever. I need to get there, and I just hope that I have the opportunity to impart something from the Father to help strengthen you up. That's it. You talk money, this other stuff, listen, it don't really matter to me. I know for my role, being who I am, Paul, apostle of the church, the leader of the church, yeah, I could pull some power play stuff. I don't want to. I I want to come and I want to bring something from the Father to strengthen what's already going on because it's really good. And he follows it up with this. And then he goes, you know what? Because I know when I do that, I'm going to get blessed back. We're both going to mutually just stir each other on. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so good. I remember teaching like Sunday school at my church. I grew up in. I think I did it. And they didn't have like a rotation thing. It was 5th and 6th grade. And it was just basically the beginning of the year. Sunday school teachers, they're basically on all year, every Sunday. And I think I did that for 3 years. This is a lot. So I did that and then stayed for second service and did that stuff. And I remember not even wanting to do it, by the way. I was like, man, I don't want to do that. Like every Sunday, the kids like, ugh. But I remember there was a need in the church. So I was just like, you know what? That's my church. I'll remember. All right, I got to do it. Got to do it. Got to get it done. That's what you got to do. If the church family needs it in particular there, even if you don't love it, you just do it. So I'm doing this. What I come to find out as I was teaching it, I come to find out, number one, I'm learning a lot of the Bible. Because their lesson plans are pretty stinky. They weren't very good. So I'm like, these aren't even fun. Like, they're boring. Like, how can I deliver this information in a way that I'm even going to hold their attention for 5 minutes? So then it's causing me to really spend time with it. And now I got to spend time with it in such a way to I'm like, okay, I got to make this so they can just grab something. And I got to make it, and I got to use language so that it can penetrate, they can understand. But all in the meantime, that's just shaping and molding me now. Because now, number one, I'm learning the word, whether I like it or not. And number two, I'm thinking of creative, simple ways to try and deliver it. And if God were to ask me beforehand, hey, would you like to grow in your walk and in your teaching and growing, Jared, by doing this with the 5th and 6th grade? I'd be like, no. Obviously, another way. That's what he did, a few years to that. And what I've come to find out is, number one, I was starting to learn a whole heck of a lot. And I was learning a ton from them. And number two, I started to realize, I'm like, you know what? This thing is so far greater than just a lesson, and if they pay attention, there's a literal spiritual battle for their souls. So I find myself just starting to pray on Tuesday of that week. As I'm looking at the lesson, like, man, D-Day's coming on Sunday. I'm like, I gotta be ready. I got this opportunity. I'm in the trenches. And so it started to be like a real work in my heart and in my mind and in my life. And Paul knew a lot about that. He's like, hey, listen, I just want to come and bring you something to just strengthen you. I could care less if people see me, if it's on camera, if it's heard, if it gets liked, if it's good. I don't care. I want to come and strengthen you. He's like, honestly, as soon as that starts happening, I'm going to be encouraged by you guys. It's going to be amazing. Such a pure heart of a leader. Isn't it good? So then, he goes down to this. Verse 13, he says, listen, I don't want you to be unaware, guys. I often planned to come to you, but I was held back. I was hindered until now. That I might have some fruit among you also, just as among other Gentiles. So he's saying, hey, I wanted to get there, but the enemy, the devil, Satan, held me back. Couldn't get there. Well, how could the devil, how could the enemy, how could Satan hold somebody back like a man of God, an apostle, like he's doing the Lord's work and doing that stuff? Well, guess what? It certainly happens. There's a real foe out there. He's alive and well. And he's able to restrict, and he's able to obstruct, but he's never able to conquer, never able to totally defeat. But he's real and alive, and it requires a lot more work and energy than we thought to be able to defeat and get him to release. It requires a lot more than what we think. But thankfully, his delay, he wrote a couple of other epistles, and he was able to do a lot of other things, and it really gave some time for this church in Rome to really develop. And so in verse 14 he says this, he says, I'm a debtor both to Greeks and to barbarians. Well, that's kind of weird, what's that all about? Both to wise and to unwise. So as much as is in me, I am ready to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome also. So check this out, he says barbarians and Greeks. This is the way they looked at it, by the way. If you weren't a Greek, you were a barbarian. Kind of like the Jews. If you weren't a Jew, you're a Gentile. There's just two types of people in the world. Same kind of deal. And he said, what do you mean I'm a debtor? How is he a debtor? just real quick, he's a debtor because, so if somebody, gives me a check for $1,000 and says he doesn't pay me back, and I got to pay him back, I'm indebted $1,000, right? Got to do it. But if Jeffrey gives me a check and he says, hey, listen, it's $1,000, give that check to Jacob, okay? So then he gives me the check. I'm indebted to him because I got to get it to Jacob, right? I got to get it to him. So with the gospel, it's not like I got a whole bunch of money. He's not saying you're indebted in some way. Just continue to you're tithed in some way or whatever. People can create some kind of weird meaning. But it is, Jesus has done something amazing. A transformative, life-changing, forgiving work. And Paul's saying, listen, the levels of forgiveness that God has expressed and put upon my life, I am in debt to pay that forward for the rest of my life. So then he says things. To live as Christ and to die as gain. That's very different than I'm entitled. People deserve to treat me a certain way. I don't deserve to be treated that way. Paul's like, man, I am in debt to everybody around me because of what God has done for me. And it's a mission for me to try and fulfill that debt in every way, shape, or form I can to get the love of Christ. Just about done. Verse 16, and this is literally verses 16 and 17 are the theme of the whole book. He says, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. Not ashamed, not ashamed. Now, I think that's kind of wild, by the way, that Paul would use that word. Because the gospel has gotten him stoned several times. It's gotten him flogged. Jesus was flogged. It's gotten him chased out of cities. It's gotten him in prison. It's gotten him shipwrecked. It's gotten him in jail for 4 years for a crime he didn't even do. The gospel, the fact that the gospel has come into his life, it actually caused a lot of problems for him. He's like, yeah, I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed. I'm good with that. And he's writing to Rome, which at that time, Rome was literally the Mecca of the day. It's something you could go to New York City, that's kind of like a Mecca spot. It's awesome. People from around the globe go and check it out. And it's like, man, I just look at the buildings, the architecture, the artwork, and just all the stuff, and sometimes you just think, man, they really have it together. Paul's like, man, I'm not ashamed of some Jewish carpenter that nobody knows about. Some virgin birth. Sounds weird. Rose again. I'm not ashamed of that. I know what it's done for my life, and I know what the power is really done. Not ashamed. Not ashamed. It's always a really good day when brave Christians just stand up and be brave Christians. Oh, Jesus Christ? Definitely. I believe in him. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. My life is associated. I love reading and seeing that stuff on social media. I can't understand social media. You know what my favorite social media app right now is? The Bible app. That's my favorite. That's the most fun one. To see highlights and notes and what people put on there. There's just a lot of nonsense on that one. I just have a hard time. Pet peeve. Doesn't mean that's your pet peeve. This is mine. So he says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. For it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes. Here's the key thing I want you to take away. The gospel has inherent power. Everybody say inherent. Yeah. It's already built into it. Sometimes the thinking is the power is in the delivery. You got to have a cool speaker. You got to have some slick musicians. You got to have a really fun event. You got to have some really cool things. Again, one of the reasons why I love these churches, plural, in Rome that have been starting and going on, they lack all of those things. It's not about the delivery, even though we try to make it be about that. And we're trying to put it everywhere and tell everybody about it, oh, how cool this is and how cool that was. We just get sucked into the cool factor a little too easily. And sometimes we miss just the simple gospel and the power of it. Jesus came. He died. He fulfilled every prophecy. He came, he died, he made a way for every single person to know the Heavenly Father and change their lives forever. So that when they say yes to Jesus, there's a whole other life they had no idea ever even existed. And if people say no to that, then they're accountable on Judgment Day for saying no to Jesus. And if they say yes to that, they don't ever have to worry about Judgment Day, and they never have to worry about tomorrow. The gospel is powerful, and that is where the power is. And the moment we try and divert a little bit from the gospel and get a little too slick on our own, it's a slippery slope. Slippery slope. And he says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first, and also for the Greek." And so, just by the way, that's not he's just talking about chronologically, not exclusively. Chronologically. Listen, this came from Yahweh, who established a Jewish nation with Jewish leaders, with a Jewish message, rooted with really, for the most part, Jewish prophets, with a Jewish couple, with a Jewish baby, a Jewish town. It came to the Jews first, chronologically, but certainly not exclusively. Not exclusively, not just for the Jews alone, it's for all Jews and all Gentiles. And the calling upon Paul's life, who wrote the book of Romans, God told him, he said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to use you as an instrument and a tool for the Gentiles." The specific call in your life, Paul, even though you are Jewish, and you've been brought up and educated in the finest, Pharisaical ways under Gamaliel, a great teacher. So listen, you lost your background, I'm using you as a tool for the Gentiles. Your main ministry, Gentiles, those who are not Jewish. So to the Jews first, then to the Gentiles. And then verse 17, literally the theme of the book of Romans. So if you're looking on your iPads or your Bibles or whatever, this is kind of something you want to highlight here. This is going to be important. Verse 17, "For in it," the "it" is the gospel. "For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written." And actually, this is a quote from the Old Testament, from our main man, Habakkuk, that we also talked about during our offering. "The just shall live by faith." The just shall live by faith. There's a righteousness of God. And this is the thing that just really kind of blows everyone away. It is not arrogant or proud to think that if you're a believer, that number one, you're a saint, and number two, you're righteous. You are a righteous person. If you're a believer, you accepted Jesus into your life and into your heart, you're righteous. For you to say something otherwise would not be smart to do, because God's not saying that. So Rob is righteous, Keith is righteous, right? Kenny is righteous, whoever, any believer, righteous. Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, some of the things you might do or say, maybe not looking so righteous all the time. But because we're not justified based on our behavior, we are made righteous by our belief. Who we believe in. That's where the righteousness is tied to. So listen, you could give me a laundry list of why you shouldn't be righteous, and why it shouldn't be happening, and why you shouldn't get that title because it's too proud or arrogant or whatever. But that's not the issue. The issue is, have you entrusted your life to Jesus Christ fully and completely? Because if that answer is yes, you better believe you are righteous, covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, and in a relationship with God that really knows no limits, and who knows where that might go. So you are now able to talk to God as a father. You're now able to have a relationship with the Lord and ask Him for certain things and experience His hand of blessing. Where previously, no, you were not. Well, we're all God's children. No, we're not. In John 1, it says the children of God are those that have allowed themselves to be adopted into the kingdom. God's children are those that have said yes to God and surrendered their lives. So we might all certainly be God's creation, but certainly not everyone is part of God's family or his children. That's part of the gospel. And that's why Christians and believers, we are where we are. We're called to carry out the gospel message and make sure we tell other people about it. And the idea is we're not just telling them and preaching at them. It's able to also be shown in our lives. Listen, yeah, Jesus is real. Certainly, I believe all those stories in the Old Testament. I believe all this, da-da-da. And also, since I've been living my life for Christ, here's how it plays out. Here's how I know it's true. Here's how the impossible becomes possible. And so Paul, he's getting pretty excited because he knows at some point he's going to go see them. I can think of him like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see it. I didn't plant this church. Nobody knows where these guys came from. But somehow this organic thing of the Spirit put these people together. They're simply following the Lord the best that they can, and they're becoming famous. And they don't even know. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. So, next week what we'll do, we get into some stuff that Paul has to address, because Paul has to sort of make clear some things about God's wrath and unrighteousness and all this stuff, all the really fun stuff to talk about. So we'll take a look at some of that stuff next week. But I hope this week number one, that your heart at least gets a little bit prodded about what makes a famous pistis. A famous pistis. Right? It's just simply being obedient the best way you can with whatever you know. That's it. And it doesn't matter what the circumstances are. It really doesn't matter. And this helps make that really clear for us. And I also hope that you're encouraged with the gospel message, because that's where the power is at. The power is not how you deliver it. The power is not how talented you may or may not be. The power is not how well maybe you can pray or do something. The power is the gospel and receiving it and living it. That's where the power is at. That's where the power is at. Doesn't matter what even kind of natural signs and wonders might happen around you. But yeah, sure, I'd love to see more of them. But the power is in the gospel. That's where it's at. That's where it's really important. We want to be experts at knowing what the gospel is, being able to communicate it, and being available no matter any time or day, any opportunity to bring conversations and to bring people towards Jesus. In a day and age where you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, we're called to shine. No, it's not about religion. It is about Jesus. It is about the Holy Spirit. It is about relationship. And so, yeah, you better believe we're trying to figure out a way how to get it back to them. There's nothing wrong with bringing that to the surface from time to time. Instead of being just be polite and not really bring it up. There's nothing wrong with bringing it up and talking about it. It's good. The world needs to hear it. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for. So we're going to take communion together. Maybe we can just put that song on in the background lightly. I hope during communion that you get a chance to just talk with the Lord of some things that we talked about. Thanks. And just hold on to it. We're going to take it together.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest free, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. When darkness veils His lovely face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my